Hi, I'm Berzin Balsara, and this is how to write a Congress speech. There are three basic steps to writing a Congress speech: the intro, the body, and the conclusion. Basically, you want to tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you actually told them. Now think about that. What did I just tell you? The intro starts with an attention-grabbing device, or what we call an AGD. This can be a joke, a quote, a startling statistic, or simply a heartfelt story. Its main job is to grab the audience's attention and begin your speech on a good note. After you actually deliver your AGD, what you'll want to do is find a way to link your AGD to your main argument. In other words, explain how your AGD associates with the argument that you're making in your speech. After you give your actual link, you'll want to list the 2 to 3 main points that you'll be describing in the speech that support your main overall argument for today's speech. The body itself contains 2 to 3 main points that describe each part of your argument. Each argument you'll want to have a claim, warrant, and an impact. The claim is basically your statement on a particular part of your argument, where you give a generic overview of what that specific argument is trying to explain to the audience. Then you'll want to jump into your warrant, which is basically where you describe the credentials of the source that you want to use to support your claim. Specifically, you'll want to avoid things like blogs, Twitter posts, and other things like The Onion. But what you'll want to do is find valid sources for information, like CNN and other news outlets that have valid credentials that will describe and support your argument without any fallacies in the argument itself. Then you'll finally want to end each argument with an actual impact. This is where you'll want to describe to your audience itself why they should care about your topic and what's the significance of the argument that you've made as it relates to the topic of your speech. After you deliver your impact, you'll want to do this 2 more times depending on the number of arguments you actually have in your speech. But what you'll also want to keep in mind while you're actually delivering your speech is how you want to actually present yourself through physical appearance during your speech. Several main ways to do this is first and foremost maintaining eye contact with your audience. While you will have your speech in front of you on your legal pad, you'll want to look up from the legal pad and actually make eye contact with the audience in the surrounding room. More importantly, you'll also want to move from a different position each time you transition into another argument. You'll notice in the speech as follows that the actual speaker moves from the starting point with her introduction and moves from point to point as she finally closes back in the starting position for her conclusion.
In your conclusion, if time permits, you want to relist all your body points and arguments and connect them back to your AGD. This is called a zinger. You don't want to forget your zinger. It is the most important thing in your speech, and it is the last thing that the chamber and the judges will hear. Therefore, you want to make it memorable. Also, remind the chamber at the end to stand with you in either affirmation or negation of this legislation.
You'll have 3 minutes to give the speech and a 10-second grace period. During the 3 minutes, keep track of time through the presiding officer's gaveling procedure. If the presiding officer is gaveling once per minute, start wrapping up your speech because that marks the 10-second grace period. Afterward, there will be a questioning period of 2 minutes or 1 minute. There will be no direct questions, so be prepared to answer as clearly and concisely as possible.
I'm Representative Govind Acharya speaking for the first time today, as always at the leisure of the judges, the chamber, and Mr. Speaker. Just a nod from the judges when you're ready. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I personally am a huge Captain America fan. So the other day, while revisiting one of his films, I noticed something a little strange. The characteristic red, white, red, white, red, white stripe with the star in the middle isn't like the American flag, but rather the Puerto Rican one. And I thought it was kind of strange that the American people can rally so fervently behind the Captain America, but they can't do the same for Puerto Rico, which is why I authored today's piece of legislation, the Puerto Rico Relief and Recovery Act, because this allows Congress to give Puerto Rico the much needed help that they deserve. Stand with me and pass for a few major reasons. First, because it's going to allow us to solve their debt crisis, and second, because it creates a platform for stable economic growth. So the first reason we passed today's legislation is because it solves the debt crisis. As the New York Times explains on May 5th of 2017, that currently Puerto Rico is $80 billion in debt, and that's partially because of problems on part of the Puerto Rican government. For the last 10 years, because of declining economic activity, they've been selling triple tax exempt bonds, meaning that people who buy these bonds don't have to pay taxes at a local, a state, or a federal level. This makes the Puerto Rican bond market extremely lucrative. However, for the past decade, since they've been selling bonds at this triple tax exempt rate, they've been selling too many, and now they're in a position where they can't pay back their bond debts. But fortunately, today's legislation provides a simple solution to Puerto Rico's debt crisis. First, it allows for Puerto Rico to declare Chapter 9 bankruptcy, which will essentially temporarily freeze their debt obligations to other countries and other entities. This will allow for a more stable platform for economic growth, but it also gets rid of the triple tax exempt status of Puerto Rican bonds. This will also get rid of the lucrative state of their bond market and create better growth. But the second reason we passed today's legislation is because it creates a platform for stable economic growth. As the Mercatus Center explains in April of 2016, that since 1972, there was an IRS code in place called Section 936, which essentially gave corporations tax breaks in order to move operations like manufacturing into Puerto Rico. But since 2006, Section 936 has been phased out, and as such, manufacturing has moved out of Puerto Rico and into other countries like China and Taiwan. And that has been very, very detrimental towards the Puerto Rican economy. Today's legislation reverses that. It allows us to reinstate Section 936, which will bring back the economic growth that Puerto Rico once had. It will create more jobs and a more stable economy for Puerto Rico to experience in the long term, thus creating a better business environment. While the American people might strongly rally behind Captain America, it's time we do the same for Puerto Rico. Stand with me and pass.